dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. Your next stop, the Twilight Zone.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage your District 1 Vice President from Omega Gamma Chapter at El Paso Community College, Ms. Connie Gonzalez.
Good evening, Texas. Good evening. How was your first seminar session? Well, let's see what's in store for this episode. I hereby call the second general session of the 2014 Texas Honors Institute to order. This episode is sponsored by Texas Women's University, located in Denton, Texas. Here to speak with us this evening is Brandon Vance, admissions counselor, and now a word from our sponsor.
Good afternoon, Texas. How are y'all doing? All right. I love the energy. Wow. So I'm here on behalf of Texas Women's University. I promised them that I would kind of stay on script this year. But being Phi Theta Kappa, one of the things I love about this experience and being able to come out here with you guys is when I was in Phi Theta Kappa at the Sigma Tau chapter, where you at, Sigma Tau? I actually wasn't really involved, and so I didn't get to experience a lot of these. I didn't get to go to the Honors Institute or go to the Leadership Conference. I'll admit it. I'll admit that. But now I'm getting to live vicariously through all of your adventures and getting to be here last year for the superheroes and now here for the Twilight Zone. And so it's awesome for me. But on behalf of my university, Texas Women's University, located in Denton, Texas, I just want to say we are honored to sponsor Phi Theta Kappa and the events that you hold throughout the year. When you're thinking about making the next move and looking at different universities, I hope that you will really give Texas Women's a thorough look. Just a couple quick facts about TWU. We were founded in 1901, so we've been around for a good little bit. We are fully co-ed. A lot of people still think we're only for women for some reason. I think it might have something to do with that name, I don't know. But we love our name, and so we're not changing it anytime soon. But on top of that, Texas Women's University is known for allied health and healthcare programs. So those of you that are maybe interested in going to medical school, veterinary school, nursing, any of those types of programs, definitely you want to look at TWU. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we have the #1 nursing program in the state or in the country, but TWU does have one of the premier nursing programs in the country. On top of that, we have some great teacher education programs and several other programs. Another thing that I definitely wanted to share with you, two things in particular related to money, because money is important, and I'm talking about money to pay for school. So we do have a Phi Theta Kappa scholarship as well as a transfer scholarship at Texas Women's University. And so, and like a lot of our cohorts at other universities, they have them as well. So you definitely want to consider that. But there's two things in particular that TWU has that are recent. The first is that we have an honors program that's a new program called Touchstone. Now you know the traditional honors program that's typically for first time in college freshmen, or for those that have gone to community college and done honors and then they transfer to the university and continue that on. Well, we actually have one of the first in the state honors programs for those that have never even gone to honors at the community college. And so if you've been a traditional student, successful, as you all have, and you're interested in being in honors when you transfer to the university, TWU has a program that's designed specifically for transfers that have never been in honors. So that's something to look forward to. Now let me ask you this question. How many of you know about the Terry Scholarship? I know some of you know about the Terry Scholarship. Come on, that's a lot. That's a pretty lucrative scholarship. Typically, most people know it from freshmen. TWU was just awarded the Terry Transfer Scholarship, and we're taking our first class in of Terry Transfer Scholars this fall. We actually have 9 students that were awarded, and of those, I believe 4 are Phi Theta Kappa. 3 of them were names that I personally submitted, and some of my Phi Theta Kappa kids. And so I just want y'all to know that TWU definitely has some opportunities, has some financial assistance for you, and has some great programs. Even though we are the most affordable public university in the Metroplex, I just love saying that, just something, you know, to throw out there. TWU is the #1 most affordable public university in the Metroplex. I'm just saying it twice. Again, we just love supporting Phi Theta Kappa, and we're here for you, as well as the other universities out in the hall. So afterwards, after the speaker comes up, if you want to come out and mingle and get some information, come out and talk to us. And if you don't have time today, that's no problem. Our website is www.twu.edu, and my name is Brandon Vance. I'm one of the admissions counselors, and I'm also a Phi Theta Kappa alum. Thank you.
Mr. Vance, on behalf of the Texas region, we would like to thank you for your support of Phi Theta Kappa.
At this time, it is my great pleasure to introduce Ms. Inge Auerbacher. Born December 31st, 1934, in Kippenheim, Germany, she was the last Jewish child born in the village. Experiencing Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass, as a 3-year-old child, Inga and her family were imprisoned in the Terezin concentration camp from 1942 to 1945 in Czechoslovakia. Despite being a disabled war veteran from World War I, awarded the Iron Cross, her father was still deported to the Dachau concentration camp on November 10, 1938. Her grandfather would soon suffer the same fate. Luckily, both were released from their torture after a few weeks. Miraculously, against all odds, Inga and her parents survived through these terrible years. At least 13 immediate members of her family were killed. Inga is the only child survivor from the state of Württemberg, deported from Stuttgart, Germany, to the concentration camps. In 1946, Inga and her parents immigrated to the United States. As a result of her time in deplorable conditions in the concentration camp, Inga suffered for many years from the effects of tuberculosis. Tough times continued with years of hospitalization, chemotherapy, and the loss of 8 years of schooling. As a true testament to her fortitude and zest for life, Inga graduated from Queens College in New York City with a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry. Such an amazing feat. As a result of her efforts, she was able to work as a chemist in medical research and clinical work for 38 years. Currently, she is enjoying retirement, traveling to many countries, speaking about Holocaust, tolerance, and human rights. She has been the subject of numerous documentary films and the recipient of many distinguished honors, such as the New York State Woman of Distinction, the Ellis Island Medal of Honor, the Knight's Cross of the Order of Merit of the Federal Republic of Germany, and many other citations of honor from various governmental agencies. To top it off, Inga is the author of 6 books and has been published in 9 languages. Please give Miss Inga a big Texas welcome
That was some welcome. Thank you so much for this warm welcome. And hello, Phi Theta Kappians. 3 cheers for Texas. I bring you regards from the Big Apple. Yes, I'm a damn Yankee. I want to thank Mrs. Esparza and her husband for being so kind to me. And I have a special guest here who traveled all the way from Seguin, Mrs. Lisa Barry. Would you stand up, please? She has been my friend for more than 10 years. She found me on the internet, I believe the internet, and some other things. And I've been speaking in her school, in the Navarra Middle School, 10 times. And every time I stay in their home. So I know her in-laws, her outlaws. I've been part of the family now for 10 years. And she said, when you come to this neighborhood, I'm coming again. So thank you, Lisa, and your whole family. The world is in terrible shape today. And we thought when World War II ended, everything will be fine. But it isn't. Look at the news. Terrible. Could it happen again? Yes, it could. And that's why it is so important to speak of the past, to remember, to learn from it. Have we learned anything from the past? Very little, unfortunately. But I will take you on a personal journey now of my first 10 years growing up in Nazi Europe and beyond. I'll speak to you tonight about the Holocaust. What do we mean by that term? It means complete destruction by fire, when 11 million innocent people were killed. A better word would be slaughtered. Who were these people? 6 million were Jews. Hitler had a special hatred against the Jewish people. He wanted every single one to be killed. And what is it actually to be Jewish? He said, we're a race. We're not. We're a religion. Who was the most famous Jew of all time? Could you tell me, please? Hitler. Hitler was not Jewish. Jesus. He was Jewish. And when you think of the Christian religion, it is just a continuation of the Old Testament, which we believe in. So we have more in common than not. In fact, I'm happy. I only have to worry about one testament. You have to worry about 2. It's enough, 1. And it's a longer one than the first, so I have to go through all of that. But among those people were 1.5 million children. And those 3 million children's eyes still haunt me. Because their story was mine, and mine was theirs. Who were the 5 million other people? They were Jehovah's Witnesses, gypsies, people with physical and mental difficulties, some priests, some Poles, and also people with different sexual orientation. They all deserved the right to live, every single one of them. In fact, my last book, which I have copies here, is about a Polish girl who was exactly my age when all of this happened. Her name was Bożena Urbanović Gilbride, and we decided to write a book together, the similar stories in different countries, different religions. So that was the last book that I wrote among the 6. Yes, I was a chemist for 38 years, and I'm happily retired now. I do travel all over. I have an invitation already next year to go to New Zealand. That's far. Got to break up the trip. It's too long. Anyway, I want to take you now on the journey of my first 10 years growing up and a little bit beyond. Next. Oh, you got my name in lights, hey. I never thought. I always did want to become an actress. I did. Even named my doll after famous movie star, Marlene Dietrich. You don't know about her, but she was very, very famous in Germany. Next. I was born on December 31, 1934, in a little village called Kippenheim, at the foot of the Black Forest in southwestern Germany, near the borders of France and Switzerland. I would say it's the most beautiful area. Some people say it's Bavaria, but I think the Black Forest is just beautiful. So I'm a Black Forest girl. And yes, I'm 79 years young, not old, young. Yes. I would like to become as old as Moses. We always say until 120. Then I can go. It's okay. After 120, it's okay. Now, Jewish people lived in Kippenheim for at least 200 years. And actually, Jewish people lived in Germany way over 1,000 years. And when they talk about Jews in Germany, we never were more than 500,000. 500,000, that's all. In Poland, there were 3 million. But Germany only had 500,000 Jews among all the Christians. And we lived very happily together, house to house. They went to church on Sunday, and we observed our Sabbath on Saturday. Was the only difference. Otherwise, everything was the same. My father was born also in Kippenheim. Next. And next, please. Okay. This was the house I'm born in. When you look on top of the second floor, the last 2 windows on the right, that is the room I'm born in. And there was no hospital at that time there. They had a small hospital, but they closed it down. It wasn't functioning anymore. And my father said, look, I'm born in the house. She should be born in that house too. We owned that house for about 100 years. And so there was a doctor who came to my mother's bedside. She had a terrible pregnancy. I gave her trouble for 9 months. I said to my mother, was I really worth it? I don't know. She said, of course you're worth it. Anyway, he would come to our bedside with his Nazi uniform. He already belonged to the SS, the stormtroopers even, wearing his brown uniform. But that was very strange. But he still took very good care of his Jewish patients. Strange. Later on, he did some terrible things, the euthanasia program, most likely, killing people with mental, physical difficulties. And he was in jail for many, many years. But I cannot say anything bad about Dr. Weber, who gave me the gift of life. Next. Next, please. You hear me? Yay. I have to speak to God. God help. Hello? Okay. All right. My father was a textile merchant. We were millionaires. We were comfortable. And he already had a car. That was something very special, because the doctor had a car and very few in the village, maybe another person. And when my mother met him, he came showing off, you know, his car before they were engaged. He was dating her, whatever. She lived pretty far away. And by God, she, had a car. That was so special. And of course that helped for her to say, yes, I'll marry you. Next. I remained an only child. Next, please. My father was a soldier in World War I. We were proud German citizens. We knew nothing else. Yes, we had the Jewish religion, and we were modern Orthodox. We observed the holidays and our dietary laws. We're not supposed to eat pork and other. It's quite difficult if you observe all the dietary laws in the Jewish faith. And he fought in World War I, got hurt quite badly on his right side. He would never be able to raise his right arm, and he received the Iron Cross. And had he stayed alive to see his only child would get the Presidential Cross later on, which I got last year. That was really awesome. By the Consul General in New York, on Park Avenue. They gave me a little party. Had I been in Berlin, the President Gauck, his name is, we have a chancellor and a president, he would have given it to me. So that was really quite wonderful. Now, we were proud German citizens. My great-grandmother, for instance, had 14 children. And she had 4 sons in World War I. 2 died for Germany. Later, they killed some of the others. Proud Germans. Next. And when I go to Germany, I go every year at least once. My German is still very good. I'm fluent. I can read and write it. And we kept a German household, I would say. Yes, we were Americans, but still German was spoken at home, and we ate German food, etc. My mother cooked really the German way, all the way. And here I am in my sandbox, perhaps thinking already someday she will be a scientist, and I'm doing my first experiments. Wait, I would have liked maybe someday to be like Albert Einstein or Marie Curie. I noticed you had on the screen before energy equals mc squared, right? That's the formula that Einstein evolved and found, he coined it. Energy equals mc squared. Anyway, here I am, the future scientist of the world. Next. Very serious. I visited the Black Forest, which was very nearby, and I'm wearing the traditional dress, the dirndl dress, the peasant dress, all the little girls wore. And my parents gave me a real German name, Inga. It was very popular at that time. And when later on, when I went to school, when the teacher said, Inga, stand up, all the girls would stand up. It was very, and if you would have, in a German audience here, I would ask, what about your grandma? Does she have a grandma's name was Inga? Oh, yeah, the hands go up. My favorite place was this little tower, and it has a little story too. The house where I was born has a plaque on it. And it says, this is the birthhouse of our beloved philanthropist, Georg Stutz von Ottenberg. There was a tailor who owned the house before my great-grandparents bought it. He went to Switzerland to do his apprenticeship, and he was taken by a British guy to London, and eventually was hired by a German tailor shop, and the tailor died, he inherited that tailor shop. That would become the most famous tailor shop in London. He became very rich. He made those boobies, they call them, those black bear hats, uniforms, and he was known as a very elegant tailor shop. And he came back to give some money to the poor people on his name day. He opened up an orphanage in the Black Forest, and flood relief, etc. And to honor him, they built this tower. And also, he was knighted for him doing good deeds. Today, there's a plaque right next to his that says, I'm also born in this house, with my picture as a little girl on it. And I feel really good. I was born in a house with very good karma. Next. The time is 1938, when everything changed. This peaceful scene in 2 days would be changing the world for the Jewish people, for especially Germany and Austria forever. It was Kristallnacht, and the night of broken glass, the first major riot against the Jewish people in Germany and in Austria. And this was just before it. My grandparents lived about 200 miles away. They came to see us. And often, and I was their only grandchild, so they came and I went there a lot. And you see my grandfather is wearing his head covered, just like the Muslims have hats like that too, because in the Orthodox tradition, boys and men have to have their head covered to honor God. I know Christians take off their hat to honor God, except the Pope and the cardinals. They stole it from us. That little beanie, you know, that the Pope wears. Well, the men wear it in my religion. And there's something very special. The doll. She would be the only object from home that would survive the terrible years. My grandmother gave it to me when I was 2 years old. And I had her till almost about, well, actually I gave away some 15, 18 years ago. Brought her to America. She went through everything. And I found out, I showed that picture in Germany, and some woman said to me, that was a Schildkrötenpuppe, a turtle doll, that was not supposed to break any time, or you could wash it. And she said, and you know, her name was Inga. I said, what? That's my name? But I named her Marlena after that famous movie star, because I couldn't read. My mother had an album with pictures, and I said, Mommy, who's that lady with the blonde hair and blue eyes? Well, that's Marlena Dietrich. She was like a Britney Spears, you know, for people. But more elegant and much more, I think she was more intelligent, too. Marlena Dietrich was pretty smart. And so I named her Marlena. Everybody knew. But then I found out even more. During the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, that was the Hitler Olympics. He wanted everything, blonde hair, blue-eyed. Not that he was. He wasn't even German. And they made even this doll, especially for that 1936 Olympics. And we made a film about that, the Olympic doll. And even now, I had a call last week from the Holocaust Museum. They want to do a big story on this, and now all of a sudden they're very interested. I gave the doll to them. They showed her once, but she's quite brittle, but now they want to show her. Okay, because it's never too late. Because the Washington Post had a story about this. Next. Here was our beautiful synagogue, and as I said, in one day, everything changed. Next, please. The inside of a synagogue. Now, in the Jewish faith, you have a rabbi and a cantor, because most of our prayers are sung. Now, we didn't have a rabbi, and the cantor had to do both. And it's very important to have a good voice. That's why you had a lot of Jewish singers came from the Lower East Side. They were all, the parents were cantors, and they even started to be cantors, but then they became popular, like Al Jolson and people like that. They all came from cantor families. They have a good voice. Next, beautiful chandeliers. And on November 9th and 10th in Kippenheim, it happened on the 10th, Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. All the synagogues throughout Austria and Germany were either burned to the ground or desecrated very badly. In our town, the Christian houses were nearby. They started to burn it, but they would have gone up in flame too. But they desecrated it very badly. Somebody had these pictures, and they gave it to us, and that was our synagogue. And what's interesting is, even children were watching as this was happening. You see a little girl there. She's watching. And they tore everything apart. It took our holy scrolls, the Torah, ripped it up, burned it. And all the men on that day, from the age of 16 on, were taken to concentration camps. In our area, it was Dachau. My grandfather went to the synagogue in the morning, taken from his prayers, sent to Dachau. Police came to our house, sent him to Dachau as well. So only women and children were left in the village. Anybody from 16 on, as boys, men, were taken away because they were Jewish. All the windows in our houses were broken. The stores were broken into. I remember standing in the living room, surrounded by glass. I was not even 4 years old at that time. I remember it very clearly. And one hoodlum saw that the chandelier was still hanging, and he took a big rock and threw it through the window and said, "Oh, we have to get that one." And my mother just pulled me away, and then we hid in the backyard shed for hours. We thought they would come in and probably would have killed us. Next. For many years, the building looked like this. I took that picture in the 60s. And it was used as a storage area for pig food. And you know we are not allowed to eat pork. I had a problem tonight with eating. They had pork, but then somebody had fish. And I went there and I got fish. Because I don't eat pork. Anyway, I took that picture in the 60s. Today, it has been rebuilt from the outside, looking exactly what it looked like before. But the inside, they fixed up, but they left the scars. And it is used today for cultural events, concerts and lectures. I spoke there a few times. But you see, the tablets are on the top without any Hebrew lettering. It is no longer an active house of prayer. It's a symbol that once Jewish people lived with us peacefully. And I have to tell you, the two most beautiful buildings in Kippenheim is the synagogue and the city hall. The synagogue sits right smack in the middle of the village. Next. All the men were in Dachau, and they permitted them to come home again after a few weeks. My father and my grandfather never wanted to leave Germany. But when they were in Dachau, they were treated very badly. They had to give up all their clothing and wear these striped pajamas, blue and white prison uniforms, stand at attention in the bitter cold. And if somebody wanted to blow their nose, they were hosed down with ice cold water. And that happened to my father a few times. They said to him, "Oh, you have the Iron Cross? That's like the Purple Heart. You can throw that away. We don't care. You mean nothing to us." And when they came home, my parents saw, especially my father, we got to leave this country. But where? All the doors to the free world were shutting very, very quickly. We sold a house at a cheap price and moved in with my grandparents in this even smaller village of about 1,000 people. At one time, the village was 40% Jewish. There was a baron there with a castle. He permitted the Jewish people to settle there about over 200 years ago, but they had to live separate, like in a ghetto. This was a Jewish street, and he gave them permission to slaughter ritually and a plot for the cemetery. But almost everybody left around 1850. That's when they came also, the Germans came to America. Or they went to the cities to have a better life, except my branch of the family. They stayed. They were the last Jewish family living there. And that was the Jewish street. Now remember, of course, later on, everybody lived mixed up. We walked up and down the street. I had only Christian friends, and I have to say, in that village, the people were good to us, for the most part. Children played with me. They didn't call me bad names. I would be even their ringleader, walking up and down the street, singing the songs of the day. Now, we just talked about this Albert Einstein, energy is MC squared. Well, he had an aunt and uncle living in this village. And there was a bakery at the end of the street. It's hard to show it from here. On the left side, there was a tiny bakery, and his aunt and uncle owned that. And I found out much, much later that he used to come as a boy to this village. And had I known that later on, I wanted to meet him, because I was the only child who was sent from Stuttgart, the capital of Württemberg, where he also came from, who would come back from the camp. The only one who survived, the only child. Not only that, I was a crazy nerd, wanted to be a scientist, so I think he would have invited me to come to Princeton. I missed that opportunity, so what can I do? Now, my grandparents had this house, and my grandfather was a cattle dealer. Most Jewish people in the small villages, they were not allowed to have big stores at that time, or the professions. For instance, like to become a carpenter, the unions wouldn't accept them. So what they did is become cattle dealers and small time. So the stable was in the house. The right door, the black thing you see there, that was the opening to the where the stable was. And then the other one is the entrance to the house. And I have to tell you, those were my 2-3 only years that I was allowed to be a child. And it was a wonderful 2-3 years, walking through the meadows and barefoot. There was a farming community. My grandfather would take me in the stable. He put me on the cows. And even now, I yearn for that smell. Whenever I go to the Midwest, or was in Montana on a huge ranch. I was also on the King Ranch, by the way. I was a guest. I was allowed to sleep in the big house, believe it or not. I didn't see many cattle there. They were far, far away. But in Montana, I was right in the middle of this with the black anchors, and I just loved it. That aroma to me brought back the memories of a very short childhood. Yes. My best friend, Elizabeth, she was a Christian girl. And she lived across the street. She was my first girlfriend ever, and I still am friends with her. Her mother was my mother's best friend. Of course, we would become best friends. And again, the doll is always with me. Next. My grandfather died soon after coming back from Dachau of a broken heart, both physically and spiritually. And he was the last Jew to be buried in the Jewish cemetery. He has a special grave, lying down stone, and the others are erect. We didn't want his stone to be desecrated. And at that time, they were desecrating Jewish cemetery. Thank God nothing happened to this. Again, you see me wearing the dirty dress. German little girl. Next. Now, we are talking now about 1940. We're no longer there. We moved away in 39, right after Kristallnacht, which was 38. And all the Jews in my home state, there are 2 states, the state of Baden, Württemberg, hated each other. Today they're one state. So I always say my parents had a mixed marriage. She was from Württemberg and he from Baden. So, in the state of Baden, where I was born, all the Jews were sent, every single one, in October 1940 to a camp in France, near the Pyrenees, up near the Spanish border. And the route was Gurs, the name of the camp was Gurs, G-U-R-S, you don't hear so much about it, and Drancy, Auschwitz. But there was still a little opportunity to get out, very little. And somebody had these pictures, which are very, very rare. There's almost nothing available about the deportation of the Jews from Germany. A lot is more for the Jews in Poland and Hungary, etc. And we got these pictures. And here you see part of my family being deported. These are second cousins. They did survive via Morocco. They got out. Very long story. The one in the little boy there, he's today a librarian in the Library of Congress. But what's interesting is the bystanders. Here you have this girl. We know who she is. She's probably not alive anymore. We asked her, what did you think when your friends are being taken away? I just watched. And that is the problem, the bystanders. And Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Prize winner, said, if you're a bystander, you are equally guilty. Now, of course, this child couldn't have done anything. But next picture. Here's another cousin of ours, and second cousin. He was sent to Auschwitz. He did not make it. Next. And here, the whole town is watching as their neighbors are being sent away. Even the cow. It was an agricultural village. Okay. And here you'll see this man. We know who he was. We told his daughter, that was your father. He said, impossible. Because he had a string around his suitcase. You know, they gave them just maybe half an hour or so, pack up and go. And the trucks were ready. And, no, wait a minute, slow. And we said that was Shabbat, and it really was, and unfortunately he did not make it. Now remember, we're not living in that part of Germany anymore. We're living further north. And it was time for me to go to school. It's 1941 now. We're still safe. But the laws came out. No, the Jewish children could not go to school with the Christian children. And they had to travel every day to the town in Stuttgart, the capital, to go to school. I was not allowed, and with permission. And even by that time, our citizenship was already taken away. That happened in 1935. I was maybe 6 months a German, and I was stateless. Then the gold was taken away, the silver, the radio. Every day some other laws came out, give up everything. And, okay, next please. And so there was this school in Stuttgart, the capital of Württemberg, state of Württemberg. And we had to get travel permission to go. In the beginning, my father took me, first by bicycle, about 2 kilometers, to the train station, and then the train. But then they had to do some slave labor, and I went all by myself. And it became even more difficult. Yes, next please. And here's one of the classrooms, next. And became even more difficult when we had to wear the yellow Star of David. And we had to buy those stars. Everything had to be bought, whatever. In fact, the damage for Kristallnacht, we had to pay. They did it, we had to pay. The stars came on a yellow sheet. You cut it out, you had to pay for that too. Bad cloth, and it looked like this. This was the star I wore. You still see the threads on it. I ripped that star off on May 8th, 1945, when I was liberated from the terrorist concentration camp. And here my mother put a backing on. And my father would say, try to sit in such a way that you could cover up your star. It was worn on the left side. Anybody from the age of 6 had to wear that star, sewn on. And it was not always possible that I could find a window seat. I don't know what this is. No idea. Was that yours? Sorry. Anyway, it wasn't always possible. There was only once. Did I break something bad? Well, I'll pay for it. Anyway, I remember there was one woman who saw me, and as she passed me, she put a little bag of rolls, brown paper bag, next to my seat and walked away. I never forgot that good lady. Without a name, wherever I go, and I know Lisa has heard that story many times, but I repeat it over and over again. She was one of the heroes of my past. And never knew her name. She wanted to help that little child, and never forgot her. And I hope she's in heaven. I know she is. She's looking down. She remembered me, she would say. Next. Here's about what I looked like in those days. Next, please. And then the transports to the camps began in that part of Germany. 1941, in the fall, actually late fall, Octoberish, the first transport went to Riga, Latvia. And my grandmother and my father and my mother and I were in that transport. And my father wrote to the Gestapo, the secret police, that he was a war hero. He was wounded with the Iron Cross. Could we be spared? We tried for my grandmother. We were spared at that time, but not my beloved grandmother. And it was very strange yesterday. I sat next to a woman on the plane. She just came from Riga. And I went there a few years ago to see these mass graves. I wanted to say goodbye to my grandmother. Riga is a beautiful city. Outside has a lot of forests. You walk into one of them, birds are chirping, and you come upon this memorial, jagged stones, a gazebo, with the names on the bottom on the earth, Stuttgart, Nuremberg, Hamburg, where they came from. And then you walk up a steep hill, and there's one mass grave after another, 52 altogether. At least 50,000 people and more are in those graves. And for all intents and purposes, I should have been in one of those graves. And I took a cover of I'm a Star, which you have, the German version. And I wrote my grandmother a note. Liebe Oma, ich werde dich nie vergessen. Dearest Granny, I shall never forget you. She doesn't have a grave, and I took a candle from home. And that was it. I was hysterical. Next day I broke my arm. I couldn't believe it. I saw Auschwitz, I saw all these other places. That touched me the most. And then we had to, one more back, please, I'm sorry. Can you go back 1 second? Okay, thank you. We had to leave her house that she owned and had to go into a slum area in a neighboring town. There were still a few children left at that time. And as a small example, only one of these children would survive. The girl in the striped hat, that's me. All these other children didn't make it, they were killed. Next. Next, please. Then the papers came again, and I have the few things on the table here, you can see them later. Front page of my directive, you can see it very clearly. My name on it, my number. This time we couldn't get out. And this is how a transport was put together. Each transport had at least 1,000 people. Ours was about 1,200, and I was the youngest. I was 13, youngest of 1,200. I was 7 years old only. By the way, school stopped at that point before I even finished my first grade. Only 6 months of school. Altogether in my life, I lost 8 years of school. Next. My number would be 131-408. And here is all the little towns would get the people together, and then there was a big gathering place for the 1,200 people. We went to a school gymnasium. They said, open everything. And I was wearing a little Dutch boy pin. And one of the guards liked it. And he ripped it off me. He said, "Du postest dit, but du English. You won't lead this way. You are going to Swabian dialect." I didn't know where I'm going. He probably gave it to his niece or daughter, who knows. And these pictures were drawn for me by a good friend for the book, I'm a Star, which you have. And then he saw I had my doll in my arm. He ripped her from me. And my doll was put together with rubber bands. He lifted her head so that I wasn't hiding anything, and he gave it back to me. That's why I still had it. And I made a fuss, I will say that. I wasn't going to let him have my doll. She went everywhere with me. Next. And we were sent to the main gathering place, and when they say today, this never happened, like this idiot Ahmadinejad in Iran, they took films of it, they have papers on it, I mean, everything was documented, all the documents, and this is actually a little film they made of my grandmother's transport. And there is a picture. When you look in the middle, up, there's a woman like bending. That looks like my grandmother. I can't swear to it. Certainly looks like her. That would have been the last picture of my grandmother. But we were in those two rooms just a few months later, lying on the floor, waiting for the train to come. Almost all these people were killed. We know that little girl, her name was Lux, L-A-X, and she got killed. Next. We're waiting in the morning to get our food with metal dishes, and waiting. Next. Everybody in Germany had an ID. and ours had a J on it. And they stamped on it, umgesiedelt, resettled. We didn't know where we were going to a nice apartment, nice place. And the date was 22nd of August, 1942. I have documented that I was sent away. Next. We were on a train. It wasn't a cattle car yet, but very, very crowded. Couldn't leave the train. And we were locked in, so to speak, with the Gestapo riding with us, SS actually too. It took about 2 days, 2.5 days to get to Czechoslovakia. Today it's called the Czech Republic. We arrived and they yelled and screamed, "Everybody out, drop everything and march. Take your metal dishes, a blanket, and a little knapsack." And I had my doll in my arm. And then they were whipping us to go. We had many, next please, we had many old people on the train. Next please. And they fell by the wayside. And they were whipping us. And my parents protected me by walking side by side that I shouldn't get hurt by these whips. Next. And we're marching into the camp. People saw us. This I got from an archive. And I mean, somebody took this picture from the window somewhere, and nobody asked, where are these people going to? What's happening to these people? Nobody cared. The whole world didn't care. Next. Marching into the camp. Next. And we arrive in a town which was actually a little army garrison town called Theresienstadt in Czech Terezin. It was built by the late 18th century by Emperor Joseph II in memory of his mother Maria Theresa. It was a rundown place, surrounded by brick walls, barbed wire and wooden fences, and these brick barracks. 6,000 people lived there at one time. They were not Jewish, they had to leave, and to put in at any one time 60,000 people. Between 41 and 45, we were 140,000 people. It was a way station before the killing fields, like Auschwitz. 2/3 would be shipped to Auschwitz to be killed. Close to a third died there. Only a few thousand were alive at the end. We were 15,000 children. About 1% made it under the age of 15. I'm luckily one of them. So nobody had any cameras, but Terezin was a place where you had the top intelligentsia of all of Europe. The best doctors, the best artists, the best of everything. And they put them there for one reason, that they can say, oh, they're all protected, they're in one place. But the idea was to keep them there a while, like you put the cows in the stable, you corral, and then you kill them. Because we did not have gas chambers there at that time. They were being built. They were incomplete yet, but they were in the planning stages, almost finished, completed. And there was a very bad person, Adolf Eichmann. You might have heard about him. There was a big trial in Jerusalem. He had the Jewish question under him. He wanted to kill every single Jew in Europe, perhaps the world. And they had a special trial for him in Jerusalem, and he was the only one who ever was killed. They do not have a death sentence in Israel. And they threw the ashes in the water and finished him. I saw him. He was in front of me. Very big killer. And here we had these big brick barracks. We landed up in one of them under the roof, very, very hot. And people were jumping already out of these big, that was even higher than this one, and killing themselves. And I remember I saw white sheets on the floor. And I never saw that body before, and I lifted sheet bodies, dead people underneath. People died like flies. We pumped our water from polluted wells next, so people got dysentery. And here the walls surrounding us with deep filled water, mountains of water. And the children were saying, well, why'd you jump? You know, you could do that, you could jump. I'd take a stone, I would do this. Sure, big heroes. There were a few people who did get away. with great difficulty. He needed somebody on the outside. We had no relationship with the people outside, totally incarcerated. And if they were caught, we would be punished for all of this, for them trying to run away. Next. As soon as I arrived, a few weeks later, there was an epidemic of scarlet fever. And almost all the children got it. They didn't have any place to put them. They had a few rooms. And there were 2 children in every bed. And my partner was a baby from Luxembourg. Was always wet. Couldn't help it. And I was covered with lice. I was not allowed to see my parents from around September till just before my 8th birthday. And we were covered with lice, and we had doctors, but they couldn't help us. And mice, rats, fleas, and bedbugs, those were our companions. There were no real bathrooms, there were latrines. Men went one side, women the other, and cold in the winter and hot in the summer. Well, maybe twice a year you could take a shower with permission in a room with many shower heads. The women took the children and the men went separate, always with permission. It was very, very difficult to keep clean. I was covered with lice and boils, terrible shape, but I made it. Next. And most men, women, and children had to live separately. They still could see each other. But the disabled war veterans were allowed to live together in very run-down buildings, 40 in the room, 20 in the room. We were in a room with 4 people. It was tiny. You couldn't move around. Your bed was your home. And we shared the room with a family from Berlin. We had the upper bunk and they the lower. And they had a daughter exactly my age, 2 months old in October, her birthday. She had the same doll that I had. And when she was sent to Auschwitz, she gave me some of her doll's clothing. And I gave all that to the Holocaust Museum. And I just saw that a few weeks ago because we did the story with the Washington Post. And there it was, a little shirt that she gave me before she went to, she took her doll to Auschwitz. The whole family was killed. And we, all the people around us had either, the men had their legs off, arms off, you know, war heroes. One had a draining wound in the head. Those were our fathers. And Ruth's father was half Jewish, mother told me. And she was brought up as a devout Christian. Didn't matter. She was selected, with her father was selected to go to the transport. There were constant transports going in and out, constant. And there was especially one selection where all the disabled war veterans had to go to the headquarters, the Nazi headquarters. And my father came back because he had to go with my girlfriend's father, according to the alphabet. Their name is Abraham, ours was Auerbacher. Came back, he said, I have to go to the lady with the typewriter, and a red circle was drawn around her name. We didn't know what it meant, and almost the whole camp was sent away later on, and we survived. Couldn't do anything for it, nothing. Next. Here's a double, triple deck bunk beds. This was taken after liberation by the Russians. Next. And the pumps for which we pumped the polluted water, so many people had dysentery, typhus, etc. Next. Again, the Russians took that picture. And the little carriages that brought the bread and took away the bodies to the crematory. Now, we got bread ration once a week. Wasn't really good bread, and small. My mother would make a notch in the bread. Monday, Tuesday here, Tuesday, Wednesday there, and if you went into the next day's portion, you didn't have any bread. And that was very bad. We had to stand in line 3 times a day, next please, to get our food with the metal dishes. This was taken after liberation. Nobody had a camera. Still couldn't get home because there was a big typhus epidemic. So in the morning, you took your little can, you got some black liquid called coffee. It was good to clean clothes. Yes. And you had a little bread, so it was very important to have that bread. And then lunch was maybe a potato, not a good one, and some turnips, the only vegetable I saw in 3 years. And the soup, again with murky stuff floating around. And so that was it, lunch and dinner. Not enough to live and not enough to die. Hunger was constantly with us, constantly. Next. And what did we children do? Well, we couldn't work. There was some slave labor there. They had a mica factory there, a barrack, where they cut the mica used for the war effort. I remember once they brought in uniforms, they sprayed them white for the Russian fight when they were going in as camouflage. My girlfriend, who was a little older, she told me she had to repair uniforms with bullet holes in it. I mean, we were too young to do anything. Rummage around in the garbage dump, trying to find perhaps potato peeling, cut off a little bit, a rotten turnip, cut off a little bit. Those were our games. Next. My mother was a nurse in the so-called home for old women. She never was a nurse before. And I remember going there one morning, and they all had sticks in their hands. And I said, what's going on? It turned out the night before, one of them felt something heavy on the shoulder. She turns around, a rat was sitting there. A lot of worm. Every night one of them would die, and whatever was left over, a piece of bread or an old dress, so these so-called nurses divided them among themselves. Next. The worst day I can remember happened on November 11th, 1943. They said a count out had to be taken, and everybody who was there at that time, 40, 50,000, had to go outside the camp. Of course, they were marching with us into this ravine. And we were surrounded on the hillsides by these guards pointing at us. They didn't shoot, but the guns were drawn. And they were counting and beating us. And many people died on the field. It was raining and no bathrooms, no food all day. And somehow, at the end of the day, it said everybody should go back. They probably had some much worse idea what to do with us, either shoot them on that day, all of us, or send us all to be killed in the gas chamber in Auschwitz. Many people died on the field, and that was, for me, it was a very scary day. And that's when my father, he was always optimistic. Thank God I inherited that. He told my mother gave up. She said, this is it. We're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. She fell to pieces. So my father said, don't worry, you'll ride in the car again. Remember the car? It was very important to her. It did happen. We come to America, she had a car again. School was absolutely forbidden, but some heroic teachers taught us from memory, and my father found a little notebook with a few good pages, and I had a pencil, and a friend of my mother's knew a little English, and she taught me this poem. I wish I were a little bird up in bright blue sky that sings and flies just way well, and no one asks him why. Now, I wanted to know who wrote this. And by the way, the penmanship is pretty good. Somebody who had only 6 months of schooling, but even in 6 months I could read, write, do a little math. 6 months. And it's better penmanship than I have now, believe me. And I Googled this poem. And one idea came that it was an anonymous poem written by a black slave child. But that wasn't true either. See, you can't believe everything you find on the internet. I found out there was a writer, I don't have her name right now, who actually wrote this, and I think it became a song. And I sort of traced that, but they called it the Slave Boy's Wish or something like that. But it was about a slave child, and the poem went on and on what that child wants, and I finished that poem in my wishes. Next. And finally, in 1944, in the summer, the International Red Cross decided to see one of these camps, because rumors were that people were being killed. So they said, okay, we'll show them terrorism. They made a whole beautification, painted houses, put up signs, a school, a playground, printed money with which you could buy nothing but mustard. There was an opera being sung, a children's opera for them. Verdi's Requiem was sung by some of the singers. Music pavilions set up. Some children got sardine sandwiches, not me, I wasn't in it, and the film was made. And they ate up those sardine sandwiches so quickly because they were hungry. They never had sardine sandwiches. And here was Eichmann and the whole bunch there, and with this International Red Cross from Geneva. And they believed all of this malarkey. They went away and said, yeah, everything, it looks okay. I mean, all right, they can't leave, but they have enough food and they're being treated nicely. As soon as we're out of sight, almost the whole camp was sent to Auschwitz. That's when the big selections were made. My friends, everybody was sent out, almost everybody. Next. They didn't show them the crematory, and where over 30,000 were burned. Certainly they had died. Next. Finally, on May 8th, 1945, we were liberated by the Russian army. And not before they burned many of their papers. The documents, like a piece of paper, floated through the air. And I remember hearing the trucks moving out. I climbed one of the wooden fences. And just as I did that, I heard a tremendous explosion. And I touched my head. I thought my head flew off. I remember the second very well. I ran to my parents. My father found a hole in the ground in a house, very dark cellar. Somebody took a little candle, a tiny stub of a candle. I took one thing with me, a prayer book my father found in the garbage. It belonged to a former soldier. The name was in it. He was from Nuremberg. I still have that little prayer book. And I never prayed so hard in my life as on that day. I never stopped believing in God, and I still believe in God today. I never lost that. And somehow 10 minutes to 8, somebody went up, and he said, we are free, the Russians are here. But by then already, we knew what was happening. Up to about a few weeks before liberation, they brought in these death marches from other camps because they wanted to kill every single one. Now, Auschwitz was liberated already in January, but some other camps later, so they brought whoever was still left into our camp. They were in terrible condition. They said, don't you know what was happening? So we knew. And so it wasn't a day of joy altogether. It was, we knew we had lost so many people, but we were freed finally. And then here's some of the survivors from the death marches. And then a bus came from Stuttgart to pick up the few survivors. There were a few transports, but from our transport, there were only 13 survivors, my mother, father, and I. A miracle, a whole family intact. And you couldn't do anything about it. We went back to Germany, hoping, still against hope, to see my grandmother. Of course, she had died years before. We lost at least 13 immediate members, 20 altogether. And it was then that President Truman opened the gates to us to come to America, and we took the chance with an Army transport boat, the second one that arrived in New York Harbor. My mother had a brother here, and he just came back from fighting in World War II for the Americans, Lancia Casino, and so he needed the job, and it was very hard at that time to get a job, and my parents got a job working as a couple. My mother became a maid, a cook, my father a butler, and I had a terrible cold that came worse and worse, and the lady didn't like it. He said, I have to take you to the doctor. She had children too, and this was like a big estate, and the doctor said, you'll have to go to the hospital immediately. Now, in the camp, there was a girl who got a little bit more food. And we were told, don't go near her. She has a terrible sickness. You will catch it. It's terrible. I said, how terrible can it be? She's getting a little bit more food. I want that too. I prayed to God. I want that. And what was it? It was tuberculosis. And they put me in the hospital for 2 years, almost totally in bed rest. And there was no drug at that time. I came home, and my parents had finally an apartment in Brooklyn, walk up 3 floors, still no cure. Then there was an antibiotic that came out, streptomycin. Found out later who invented it. Long story. We have a film on it, etc. because the Nobel was given for, but not to the student who actually did all the work. And I had some home instruction. In the hospital, we had very little bedside instruction. We were too sick. And the teacher they assigned me, she couldn't walk the 3 flights of stairs, so I taught myself a little. Finally, at age 15, I entered school for the first time in my life and completed high school, 3 years instead of 4, right, because I went to summer school, not because I was a genius. Then I wanted to start college, to become a doctor, actually, and study science. And after a few weeks, everything came again, everything. I had a wild summer that summer. I went out with boys, dancing all night, and I got sick again. Very bad, in fact. And now they had new drugs. I had 26 pills a day, made me sick like a dog. But I wanted to live, and 2 shots of streptomycin every day for a year. And I got better, went back to college, finished that, and worked for 38 years. Now, a few years ago, next please, some years ago, I decided, did I dream all this? It must have been a dream. And I went back to Europe for the first time, but first I went to Israel. Because it was always on our mind, one day we're all going to see this beautiful country, and we're going to be free. So I went a whole month to Israel and made my way back to Europe. And I went back to Terezin. I didn't tell that to my parents because they wouldn't have wanted to. The Russians were still there. I needed a visa. It was complicated. I went through the same gate. You see, Prague is 60 kilometers. Terezin is 60 kilometers north of Prague. Next. And I walked through the gate. I originally walked through in 42. Next. And I found the house. Today it's been totally rebuilt, the whole city, and there are people living there again. But it looked just like that, rats crawling around. Next, and the street from where the people were taken away. This is where the hand grenades were thrown in. There was a fence here. Next. And the crematory, I met the mayor. They told me, you can't take pictures, can't take, because it was a Russian stronghold. Next, but I did. You know, I'm brazen, you know. Anyway, the crematory today, it's a big memorial for crematory Owens. Next. Mrs. Bush was there too, to put a wreath there. And the red flowers depicting blood today, it's much, much bigger. Next, please. And next, please. I went back to my mother's hometown to thank the Christian people who helped us. Farmers who gave us a little food before deportation. And one more picture. To me, the most important. Next. The grave of our beloved Teresa. Teresa was my grandmother's maid and good friend for more than 20 years. And she was the one who saved 2 photo albums. She put it in her basement. Could have been killed for that. Came in the middle of the night. She gave us all food, and she saved our prayer books in the basement, and some little knickknacks. And sometimes she would put food behind my grandfather's grave. We picked it up in the morning, and it was absolutely forbidden what she did, but she did it. She was the righteous Christian. And when we came back from the camp, they said, we want to see her. And they said, well, you can't. She's dead. What? She was young. How could she be dead? How could she have died? Well, when the Americans came into that part of Germany, they, they yelled, they screamed. They were the victors, and she's standing behind the door. They thought, everybody would have guns. She didn't open right away, didn't understand English, and they shot through the door. Instantly killed. And I say, if there's a heaven, there are 2 women walking hand in hand, a Christian and a Jewish woman forever united. One killed by a Nazi bullet, the other a product of war. And I'm still very, very good friends with her great-grandchildren. That has become family. And I thank you so very much for listening to me. Thank you. time we have left. If we would have had some more time, maybe we could have questions and answers. I don't know. We can do it? Okay. And then afterwards, if you would like, I have a few things in the corner here, a close-up of things. And if anybody would like to buy the book, this new one, Children of Terror, I have copies here. It is $13, this one. So if you would like, I sign them for you, etc. I'll be happy to. I have some few things over here. Now, anybody have any question? And remember, no question is stupid. It's stupid not to ask. Because the whole thing with survivors, they're dying out. I'm among the younger ones. And here I am, 79 and a half already. You know, I mean, how long will it take? I mean, I hope God gives me a few more good years. Anybody have a question? It's hard to see here. Yes?
Did you ever manage to get back to your original home in
Kippenham? Yeah, I did. And I have a wonderful relationship with them. I can go anytime. When I'm over there, they invite me. I was there last year. And, I mean, they own the house now, but we have a great relationship with them. Yeah. What I would like to talk about is also forgiveness. This always comes up. Especially ministers, they say, you forgive us, right? Because I'm a very good Lutheran minister. In Germany, you have a lot of Lutherans living there. And he stayed in our house already, visited us in New York. He said, you forgive us, right? I said, no. I will never forgive the people who actually did the killing. The one who shot my grandmother. The ones who had no part in this, fine. I believe in reconciliation. It's not quite the same. I can become friends with them again, yes, especially the younger generation. I have so many friends in Germany. So many Facebook friends. By the way, if you want to be my Facebook friend, be my Facebook friend. Lisa was the one. She's the culprit. She put me on Facebook one night. It was like 11, 12 at night. Inga, you got to be on Facebook. And now I have about 3,500 friends. And believe it or not, I've met some of these people. And I just got a beautiful handmade owl out of cloth. Beautiful. From one of my friends. One did a picture of me. I mean, I chat with them live, you know. And I have good relations with the Germans today, you know. But there was one guy, for instance, a criminal, who killed many officers in Cephalonia, Greece. And he was indicted to be killed. And guess where he lives? In Kippenheim. He's over 90 years old. He has Alzheimer's. He worked for many years in the school, the custodian. They said, he was such a nice man. And they made a film, Corelli's Tambourine. The cage was in there. And that was about that case, about the Italian officers to be killed. Now, what is it about this whole thing? I mean, now one of them, a big Nazi, died recently. He was also indicted. Should you? I think justice should be served, no matter what. That's my opinion. But people like Dr. Mengele and something like that, how can you forgive somebody like this? Impossible. Impossible. But I do believe I can become friends again. I mean, I cannot go over there with hate in my heart. Then I have to stay home. I have to. Will I forgive these people, the ones who did it? Never. Never. Sorry. I don't have to say sorry. That's how I feel. That's for God to do. God is the final judge, not me. Human beings cannot say, I forgive for that. God has to do that. That's my opinion. Other people can think differently. That's how I feel. Yes. Yes, I can see you. The light is... Yeah, just get up. Just talk.
How do you feel about Israel's treatment of Palestinians?
Oh, please, I don't want to hear the story. That's for somebody else. I knew it would come up. And I'm not an expert on Israel or Gaza, whatever. I'm talking today about something else. And you're very well misinformed, killing this and that. If you want to know a little bit about the story, I will reiterate a little bit. Israel has very bad publicity. You know what's happening in Gaza today? I didn't really want to go into this, but I will go a little bit. Underneath Gaza are tunnels. It is filled up with tunnels to enter Israel and to kill the people. Yes, they even put underneath a school, a hospital, these tunnels, and that's where the headquarters of Hamas is, underneath a hospital. Yes, you see a lot of killing going on, but Israel tries to preserve their people. They build shelters, and they're bombing every single day. I was there 4 times, every single day, every single time I heard shooting, unprovoked totally. You have to hear both sides of the story. Yes, there are many casualties. I feel sorry for the people who innocently have to die, but they didn't have to elect Hamas, who stole all the money. They should have given it to them for food, to build real hospitals without trying to kill another. I just saw on the internet how they teach children with puppets. You have to say, what are Jews? Oh, they're pigs. And Christians too. They don't like Christians either, by the way. And yes, don't think. The terrorists do not like Christians. And, what do we do with them? Oh, we shoot them. Boom, boom, boom. No child in Israel is taught that. None whatsoever. Now, the richest man in Israel, who has become an industrial, comes from my village. I know him very well. He sold his business to Warren Buffett. Very well run whole towns he built. He wanted to build one for them that they should have jobs. And he hires a lot of Arabs in his factories. Now, there's a big problem over there. And you see they only say, oh, the Israelis are killing. Yes, they are. I mean, they use the human shields. That's why you see all these killings. Because they put them in front of hospitals, etc. That's where the ammunition is. That's where the headquarters is. You don't hear about that. The press is very much against Israel. And I have to stand here and fight for this little country. Because Jews have been constantly treated so badly over thousands of years. And God bless Mayor Bloomberg. He did, even with his millions and everything, he was going to put his life on the line. He went to Israel with an El Al plane. They are not going to go to the gas chamber again. They will not. And, they would like the Jews to be, cowards and all this. Well, they're no longer cowards. They have the best army in the world, and they fight for having a little piece of land. Little piece. And don't think that the Jews or the handicapped, whatever, would have been the last victims. There were some black people too. Had he succeeded, Hitler succeeded, who would have been the next group? Many of you wouldn't be sitting here, I guarantee it. Because you would have been dead. Your ancestors would have been dead. He was looking for a lot more reasons to kill other people. I wrote a poem, in fact, that you have the book, If Only, and for sure, we wouldn't have been the only ones. Anybody have something? So that's my idea on Israel and Palestine. I won't go further in that, but I had to speak out because I feel so passionate about this. Yes? My doll? The Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. The big one, yes. Sure. I'll be over there if you want to come over. I'll be signing some books if you want. And I have some, you can see Closer, The Star, whatever you want to see. I'll be happy. Yes. Anybody else? Last one. Okay. Make it a good one. Every question is good. Okay. Who has the last word?
You said that bystanders are equally as guilty as the people doing the killing.
Right.
How do you feel our generation can prevent being bystanders to things like genocide and slavery?
Well, I think by speaking up, not electing leaders that tend to be like that. It is very hard. I don't have the answer either, but even if you do a little bit of something, it's better than doing nothing. I'm not saying somebody should put themselves at danger. It's like bullying in school. That would be a better example. If you stand by and let the kid beat the crap out of somebody else, right? And you could tell it to the teacher. You don't have to endanger yourself. And that to me is a bystander if you just say, yeah, kill him. I don't even like boxing. I don't like any of these contact sports that hurt people. That to me are the bystanders. We are really bloodthirsty. We really are. Even like the bull running and all that. I mean, I saw that a bullfight once in my life. I had enough. I don't want to see that ever again. No way. I don't like these bloodthirsty sports, bloodthirsty ideas. I don't have the answer. I'm sorry. But you see, even those two people who helped me and my family, like Teresa, God rest her soul. I know she's in heaven, has to be such a good person. And she didn't want to be, she endangered her life by keeping those two photo albums in the basement. Now the Holocaust Museum is giving me an ultimatum. You got to give it to us. You got to. They can wait. I'll intend to live a little longer, hopefully. So that was the last, I suppose. And I thank you so much. I wish you all much luck. I speak. I live in New York, in Queens, which is the most diverse place in all of America. I live in a row house. On one side, my wall is a Muslim family from Bangladesh, very devout. Other Hindu family from British Guyana. It's called Guyana now. And they all were from India at one time. Of course, the Hindu hates the Muslim hates the Hindu. I'm the Jew in the middle. Now, but we all get along. We all are friends with each other. Then comes a Christian house, 4 religions side by side, getting along. Now, wouldn't that be wonderful that we can live like this? And we can. That's the same in Israel. They can live together if you don't have these instigators making trouble. You know, that's what it is. And I don't live on Park Avenue and talking about this whole situation. I live with these people. I go to the temple with them. I have been to many mosques. I know about it. And we all believe in one God, so one goes this way, one that way, who cares? One goes on Friday, that's the Muslim holiday. I go on Saturday, they go on Sunday, who cares? We're all friends. Thank you.
We thank you for your willingness to share your wisdom and insight with us.
Thank you.
It is such an honor for us to hear your story and learn from it. Thank you for allowing us the privilege to be a part of your world. You have touched many lives today. You truly are an inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, before I go, you can see me over here. I say to you, Shalom.
Shalom.
And in Muslim too, the Arabic is Salim. Same word. Peace. That's what I wish. Same word.